we're going to go through pages 51 to 55 in our Conservatory Canada Theory 1 lesson. That's pages 51 to 55, which is dealing with simple time. And what we were learning about at the last lesson was how to group notes according to the time signatures. So I'm headed back to page 50. When we are using what I call the little time signatures, such as 2/16, 3/16, 4/16, 2/8, and 3/8, we group everything together. So if there are 4/16 notes, we beam them all together. An eighth equals 2/16, 2/16, we beam it all together. So for those small time signatures, just beam everything together. When we have the unit beat being the eighth note at 4/8, at this point, it's usually quite an awful lot if you had 8/16 notes to beam all 8 together. So it does make sense to cut them in half. So in 4/8 time, we could do 2/8 and 2/8 and pair them. You can beam 4/8 notes together though, if you wish. But when we get things like 4/16 that equal 2/8 and another 4/16, we'll beam 4 at a time just to make it visually appealing as we are looking at the music. So our new work, page 51. Grouping of notes, unit beat equals the 16th and 8th notes. We see time signatures of 4/16 time, 3/8 time for A and B. We're going to beam everything together for these ones. As we move down to the exercise C, 4/8 time, we're going to do them 2/8 at a time. Now, if you're working on this theory and you're struggling at all, make sure to look back at page 50. Nearly every possible note grouping is available to you on page 50. I'm just going to show you what I have for my examples that I've done. Make sure that when you are rewriting the music and beaming the notes together, that you do include the time signature. It mentions that in the question 10 as well. So it says, rewrite each of the following examples, grouping the notes properly using beams. Remember to include the time signature. All right, now, what we're doing here is just taking a look here at the 4/16 time. You've got that right there, and you can see that things are beamed together as we're working on all of that. And that is our examples there. Feel free, if it's helpful, pause the video and you can take a look at my examples as well to see if they match up with yours. You may notice when things start to get a little bit bigger, I like to scoop the beats. So in the 4/8 time, I scoop them 2/8 and 2/8. So that is our page 51. Bottom of page 51 though says when the unit beat is a quarter note for 2/4 time, and I will just give a little FYI, 2/4 and 4/8 are nearly synonymous. They're synonyms for one another. 2/4, 2 quarter notes per bar. 4/8 equals 2 quarter notes per bar as well. So they're almost the same idea. But basically in 2/4 time, we're going to group things one beat at a time. You'll start to see quarter notes. They have to be separate anyways. And then, for example, at the very bottom on page 51, I see an eighth and a pair of 16th notes. That equals my beat 2. A quarter note is beat 1. 4/16 notes is beat 2. A pair of 8th notes is beat 1. A pair of 8th notes is beat 2. 4/16 notes is equal to a quarter note, so that's beat 1, and 4/16 for beat 2, and the half note stands alone. It gets the 2 beats on its own. On page 52, in 3/4 and 4/4, I always just group them together, one beat at a time. Simple as that, no changes. They do mention that in the 4/4 time one, though, you can group 4/8 notes together if you wish to. But my suggestion is go with one or the other. Don't kind of mix and match. It can be a little bit messy looking. So our goal here, grouping of notes, unit beat equals the quarter note on page 52, question 11. Rewrite each of the following examples, grouping the notes properly using beams. Remember to include the time signature. So the first one is in 3/4 time. And so I repeat the time signature, and then I like to scoop the beats. I see a quarter note for beat 1, a pair of 8th notes for beat 2, a pair of 8th notes for beat 3, and I would get that for my answer there, for my 3/4 time one right there, for the first measure. And then you can continue and do that for the rest of that line. At the bottom on exercise B, we're in 4/4 time. So again, I scoop my beats. 1 quarter stands alone. Another quarter stands alone, so that's 2 beats. It takes 4/16 notes to make 1 quarter note. So 4 get a scoop, and then the next 4 get a scoop. I repeat my time signature, and this is what I get for my answer there. All right, that is page 52. Page 53, we are on to next. Time signatures and grouping of notes here. We get a little mixture of everything. So it says add stems to create one complete bar of 8th or 16th notes. Group and beam them correctly for each time signature. And I'm just going to look at the first example here. We need 4 quarter notes per bar. We've got a pair of 8th notes, that's 1 quarter note. A pair of 8th notes, that's a 2nd quarter note. A pair of 8th notes is the 3rd, and a pair of 8th notes is the 4th. So I would use a complete bar of 8th notes, and I would do them in pairs like that for my 4 quarter notes. And then again, you can work your way through the rest of that question. Question 13. Add stems to create one complete bar of 8th notes. Group and beam them correctly for each time signature. So for the first example, for the 4/4 time, I have chosen to do them in groups of 4 here. I notice in this case that we have notes that have different places on the staff. So we're on the bottom line, the below, so I have to check my stem direction. The first 4 can have stems pointing up because they are below the 3rd line, and those point up on the right side. Then I look at the next group of 4. The first note, which is a G, can be a stem pointing up. The A can be a stem pointing up. The B that is on the 3rd line is allowed to go either way, and then the C is a down stem. So in this case, majority rules, they're going to continue to go up. And although the work is a little bit messy, you get the idea of how to do that question right there, and then we continue along through the remainder of that. In the next question, 14, add stems to create one complete, and add stems and beams to create one complete bar of 16th notes. Group and beam them correctly for each time signature. So 3/16 is again a little time signature, so I'm going to group all 3/16ths together. All of those notes in the first bar are above the 3rd line, so they should point down on the left side for the stems, and then 16th notes get that double beam, and again, the work is ever so slightly messy, but you get the idea of how to do that question right there. Moving right along to page 54. Rewrite each of the following examples, grouping the notes properly using beams for question 15. We are in 3/4 time here, so I repeat the treble clef. I repeat the time signature of 3/4 time. Here again is where I like to scoop my beats. It takes 4/16ths to make 1 quarter. We've got an 8th and an 8th rest, that's your 2nd quarter. And then we've got a pair of 8ths for the 3rd. And so you'll notice in the first bar that I have scooped my beats, and then I do my beaming. When I do the beaming, you'll notice that the 8th note and 8th rest cannot be beamed together, so it has to be separate for those ones right there. And question 16. I love these questions. I think they're kind of fun. Add the correct time signature to each of the following examples. So we look at exercise A. I see 3/4 notes in the first bar. I see 3/4 notes in the second bar. I see 3/4 notes in the third bar. I see a half note that equals 2 quarters in the fourth bar plus a quarter. That equals 3. Therefore, I think we can be very assured that it is in 3/4 time. For exercise B, I see 3/8 beamed together, another 3/8 beamed together, another 3/8 beamed together, which I would have put the last 3, those 3 with stems up, by the way. And then a quarter note that equals 2/8 and an 8th rest, which equals 1. So there are 3. Therefore, I get 3/8, and that's how I would go about doing those time signatures there. And then finally, our last page, and you can date it with your circle the page 55 and put today's date on it. That's how far we're going, 51 to 55 this week. And this one, question 17, again, in my opinion, sort of fun. Rewrite the following example, correcting improper grouping of notes, beaming, and direction of stems. So this is kind of a correcting errors question right here. Now, there may not necessarily be this many errors, but I was always taught to look for 10 errors in every question. So I really keep my eyes open for as many possible errors as possible. And I like to keep a running tally of them along the way. So I might go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, if there are 10. I doubt there will be more than 10, but I'm always looking for 10. Sometimes there's just 6 or 7, so don't get alarmed if you only find 6 or 7 errors. So I go like a magnifying glass from start to finish. Does the treble clef look good? Yep, it looks good. Does the 3/4 look good? Yep, it looks good. Then I look in the first bar. The grouping of the notes, I see 3/8 notes, then I see a single 1/8 note that looks like it's got the stem going in the wrong direction. Then I see a pair of 1/8 notes that looks like they have the stems and beams going in the wrong direction. So there's definitely a bunch of errors there. I would, in 3/4 time, do pairs of 1/8 notes. So the middle C and E could be scooped for a pair of 1/8 notes. The G and the C could be scooped for a second pair of 1/8 notes, and we can decide if the stems should point up or down. And then, excuse me, the final 2 notes, the B and the D, can be a pair of 1/8 notes, definitely in this case a stem pointing down. So I've scooped out my beats here, 1, 2, and 3. And I've chosen for the C and E to draw them as a pair of 1/8 notes. The G and C I stuck with a stem pointing up, simply because the lowest note is further away from the 3rd line. And then for my last pair, I get a pair of 1/8 notes there. So I see one error in the grouping of notes, another error in the stem, another error in the stems pointing down, and in fact there's 2 errors, so there's really kind of 4 errors in that first bar. So I've tallied it with 4 right there. So I found 4 errors altogether. And I'll leave that for you to do as well. The hardest part in correcting of errors is make sure that you don't either make an error yourself or sort of like, again, add an extra along the way. I'm usually pretty careful about being able to see where the errors are, though. So, but try your very best not to miss anything like coloring in a note or something like that along the way. Finally, question 18, insert bar lines to make the following examples accurate within the given time signatures. We've got 3/4 time, 1, 2, 3 for the first one, and 3/2 time for the second one. So 1/4, 2/4, 3/4. 1/4, 2/4, 3/4. 1/4, 2/4, 3/4. 1, 2, 3. And I've added my bar lines in there. The 3/2 time one is rather interesting. We have to find the equivalent of 3 half notes in each bar. So we've got 1/2, 2 halves, 3 halves, 1/2, 2 halves, 3 halves. 2/4 notes is 1/2, 2/4 notes is 2 halves, 2/4 notes is 3 halves, and then we've got 3/4 right there as well. And the answer to that, you'll see for the 3/2 time, is going to look like that. You may wish to pause the video here and take a look at that one, because that is a little bit of a different time signature there. I'm hoping that you will understand that. 3/2 time in many ways is much like there would be the equivalent of 6/4 notes in each bar. But don't think of it that way for the rhythm. Just think of it that way, that there is the equivalent of that many in each bar. 3 half notes equals the same as 6/4 notes. And that takes care of our